Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel. And today I just wanted to do a really quick snippet just on cluster feeding. So I've had a request from someone just wanting to know a little bit more about cluster feeding, what it looks like, how we do it, and why we do it. Okay, so let's get started without further ado. At the beginning of the night, when you're about to put baby to bed, we really want baby to have a full stomach. The reason for this is because that first couple of hours after you put them to bed, so it might be 7 o'clock that their bedtime is, or perhaps it's 9 depending on their age, but that first couple of hours, that period, they're more likely to wake up frequently if they're not full, and that can sometimes become a bit of a cycle. So, and it's really frustrating for mum and dad and baby, because you're putting baby to bed thinking, yep, I've given them a feed, and then they're waking like every 40 minutes or so because they're still hungry. So we really want to make sure that throughout that sort of late afternoon to early evening period each day, we are filling their stomachs as much as possible. When you're breastfeeding directly from the breast, what that is called is cluster feeding. So what happens is there is a natural sort of dip in supply as we come into that early evening period. So it might be from like 4 to 7 p.m. that we get a little bit of a supply dip before it peaks again overnight. So our highest periods of high intensity milk production is overnight, and then also first thing in the morning you'll find that you get a lot of milk at that time. You really engorge, things like that. So yeah, unfortunately there is just this little shift in the afternoon evening period each day, and what that means is that baby is not getting the amount that they need in the one big feed. They actually require to feed more frequently during that few hour period to make sure that they are filling their stomachs. They'll also tend to use cluster feeding like this at times in their development when they require more milk. So they need to boost your supply to where they need it to be. So they will often use cluster feeding. It might be throughout the day, even at these times, just to make your supply robust enough for them and their needs at that time. So it's really important to actually give them the opportunity to cluster feed when they're showing signs of wanting to do that, because it means that your supply is going to move in line with what they require. Another option here for parents who feel like it's just not working in their routine to sit down for a couple of hours at a time and cluster feed so frequently off the breast is you could potentially, when it comes to filling tummy before bed, you could pump a bottle throughout the day and then give that bottle to baby as a bedtime bottle so that they're nice and full before going down for that initial sleep for the night. When it comes to boosting supply, another option, if you don't wish to do the cluster feeding during that couple of day period where they're trying to do that, you could do what we call a power pump session. So a power pump session, you should usually do that for around 3 days, because it will mimic the way that a baby actually cluster feeds in order to increase your supply. So you're just trying to replicate what baby would do, but just having a little bit more control over it to work in with your routine. So I'll pop a little infographic in here just regarding what power pumping is and exactly how to do it. And I recommend doing it for at least 2 to 3 days, depending on how your supply responds. So that's another option for boosting supply when required. Now, cluster feeding, in my experience, can be done while relaxing, for example, in front of a show. So you might Netflix and chill with your baby and just pop them on one breast and feed, and then maybe the next, in half an hour, they'll want the other breast. And then you can just swap like that over a couple of hour period. And I find that watching a show is a really nice thing to do during this period, because it's almost like you're resting, you're taking a bit of time out from your normal chores, and you're also responding to baby's needs when it comes to your breast milk supply. You can actually cluster feed, and I have done this many times when you're, for example, at a dinner party or maybe at someone's house for a gathering. I find that cluster feeding is quite handy in these situations because First of all, it keeps baby happy and there's less crying, and they're getting the comfort they need from your breasts, as well as a feed where required. Second of all, there's more time for you to have adult conversations with someone while you're feeding baby more frequently, because they're busy on the breast. You can take a breather and have an adult conversation and string some words together. Woohoo! So you definitely don't have to be just bound to the house when you're cluster feeding. You can do it when you're out and about. I do feel like I don't really agree with the idea that it's practical to always cluster feed when you're out and about. So some scenarios that come to mind are, for example, if you're out and about running errands at a shopping centre. I find that shopping centres, you know, obviously there's the parenting room and feeding curtained rooms that you can use. I don't mind where I feed, so I'm happy to sit on a plastic chair in a food court or on a bench. But I do find at shopping centres sometimes it's really difficult to actually get a seat or feel comfortable enough to feed so frequently. And also, you know, it interrupts the flow of whatever you're just trying to complete and get done and then go home. So I think there are definitely some circumstances where it's not practical to cluster feed, and in those situations you may wish to build a bottle throughout the day, or rely on some previously expressed breast milk in a bottle and take it out with you, and provide that very quickly if your baby is going through a cluster feeding period, and then you can just pump again just to make sure that your breasts are drained from that period where you haven't fed. These are all just options to try and make it work. If you can cluster feed, much easier to just pop them on the breast over and over. So you can definitely use a carrier to feed when you're at gatherings or out and about. I have found a lot of success using the Baby Bjorn, just the classic carrier. It's a nice structured carrier. You can very easily unclip the little bit up here and reposition baby so that you can feed on the go. You could be walking around, or you could be standing chatting to someone without having to take baby out constantly and put them back in. So that is actually a really nice, easy option for cluster feeding when you're out and about. Again, with shopping, it's not always easy, but I have been known to stand in a food court while having lunch with my friend and cluster feed Harry in the carrier. You know, it's no big deal, but don't feel bad if it takes you a while to get to that level. If you're just starting out with breastfeeding, it took me a good couple of months to actually feel like I could do that with the carrier. You want to get it all established and feel confident with it before setting yourself that next challenge. So definitely that's not something to aim for first day out of the hospital. It's just something that over the course of your breastfeeding journey, you may find that it works really well out and about, but also in regards to cluster feeding. So everybody, in summary, cluster feeding is basically a period of time where baby is either trying to boost your supply through more frequent feeding than usual, or they are trying to fill up their stomachs in the evening, a time when our breast milk supply can sometimes have a natural dip before it up kicks again. An alternative for cluster feeding is building a bottle throughout the day and then providing that before bedtime so that baby's stomach is nice and full, or you may wish to pump for a little while during that day if baby's going through a feeding frenzy, and provide bottles so that you have more time on your hands between feeds, but just make sure that you're still draining your breast using the breast pump. If you have any questions about pumping or anything like that, please go ahead and ask. I can definitely do another little snippet on that. You can definitely do cluster feeding at home while watching a show such as at Netflix or a movie. I find that's perfect. You know, you've got your cup of tea and a couple of hours just to sit down, take in a show, bubby's happy feeding. It's a really nice time for mum and baby to bond, and also for you to just chill. So if you can try to look at cluster feeding like that, rather than, oh God, I'm going to have to feed, you know, every 45 minutes or something like that. Just try and use it as an opportunity to sit down. Yeah. You can cluster feed most certainly when you're at someone's house for a gathering or a dinner party or any type of function, and you can, if you feel comfortable, use a carrier to do so, so that you're not having to disrupt baby, putting them in and out of the carrier, or sit down and find a spot and then get up again and try and talk to people, and use it as a chance to make baby happy, keep baby calm, and to have an adult conversation while they're quietly eating. So I hope that this has helped and that it's not been too disjointed and it makes sense. Any questions, comments, please subscribe if you like what you're seeing, and I will see you next time. Bye.